Hey guys, welcome back to the Is It Legit podcast. Last time we talked about John Gottman and the four horsemen of the apocalypse as pertaining to marriage.
Yeah.
And Peter, do you want to review with us what we talked about last time and what you want to talk about today?
Yeah, essentially, John Gottman is a world-renowned psychologist that has done many studies, very data-backed. And one of his most famous studies was about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as you said. And those four horsemen are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. And this, through his research, they found that there's a 90% accuracy of a prediction of divorce if you do one or all of these things. So I thought that was very powerful. I think it's very important that most people who are married or in a very serious relationship should know.
I'll be the first one to admit, I actually just had a argument with my wife last night.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna front here, but it could have gone better. And I was actually thinking about this as I was talking to her. So I was like catching myself like, I want to say this, but then let's say this, right? Like I noticed, right? This happened. And then when this happened, I felt this way.
Yeah.
And just knowing what to say, and please go back to our other podcasts and clips for reminders, but just thinking about what you should be saying really helped guide me in that emotion. But so today, I think we're going to cover arguably maybe the most important two, the contempt and stonewalling.
Yeah.
You want to kick us off with contempt?
Yeah. So just by definition of what John Gottman says is contempt is treating your partner with disrespect, mockery, or derision. This is considered one of the most destructive of the four horsemen. And then the second one is stonewalling. But just to get back, let me just talk about stonewalling as a definition: withdrawing from the interaction, shutting down, and stopping to respond to your partner. And this is often a response to contempt. I think the reason why contempt is such a powerful part of how it can really affect your relationship negatively is, I believe life and death are in the power of the tongue. The way you view your partner or the way they feel viewed is actually very powerful. And so if you're viewing your partner as a, dumb or, incapable, or if you're viewing your partner as lazy, the way you view your partner, so it starts here, right? Once you view your partner a certain way, then your words are going to then manifest into like how you speak onto them or how you treat them. And the problem with that is if you treat them like, hey, this person's lazy, or hey, this person is this, then that person is just going to, that's going to exacerbate the way they act. Is that all making sense?
Yeah, so I think a lot about labeling, and labeling can be positive or negative. And, it's natural to want to label something and to kind of push that hurt or blame onto others, and especially your partner, because you're so close.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we work together, we spend a lot of time together, and yet there's the other half, right? Yeah. When we go home and there's the kids and the wife. I think a lot of people struggle with this, and, it's something that I have personally experienced in my relationships. And so can you give us maybe some examples of contempt from your personal life, what John Gottman talks about? I think it's nice to have some like a idea of what it looks like.
Yeah, I think I've actually heard of many examples, just hearing it on the streets among, friends
streets.
and family.
Sure.
Yeah. Among the hood of Everett.
Yeah.
What I realize is that I think, gosh, I don't mean to pick on, wives or anything like that. I'm just saying I think there are situations where wives can sometimes talk about their husbands in a very negative way. And I know it's just a moment of venting. You're just trying to like get things out, get the frustrations out. But I have heard of, it's like, oh, this person is just so lazy or very incapable of like taking care of the kids, or I feel like they're not doing enough, right? And I think one of the biggest problems is that as you are speaking that towards him, or as you are continuing to kind of view him in that certain light and kind of reinforcing this behavior, essentially, right? That person is going to then become more like that, and then going to become more incapable, more lazy, more. And I've heard that, right? So I think a lot of, and vice versa, right? Husbands can also do the same thing to their wives. Oh, this person's so naggy. Well, if you say that the person's naggy 100 times in a month, the person's going to become more naggy. That's the way this works. Now, I understand that this is very difficult to do, right? Because you obviously experienced a certain experience. Your mind is telling you, okay, I'm experiencing that this person is like this, and it's making me feel frustrated. Yet you have to, again, fighting your feelings. I know this is going to be the opposite of what the society, is telling us. We have to fight our feelings. We have to fight against the temptation of labeling this person, treating this person, and speaking negative, death tongue to our partners, or else it's just going to reinforce and worsen it. You have to do the opposite, in my opinion, is to just continue speaking life. When they do the right thing, when they do right things, always speak life, always affirm, always confirm what they've done, as it really makes them feel appreciated, and that's how you're going to see real change. But it's really hard to get there.
So when you feel like you want to say something that is in contempt, right? You're tired, you've had a long day, you're watching the kid, somebody yelled at you for no reason, right?
Yeah.
And said you suck, I hate you.
Yeah.
You ruined my life. And then you have another argument with your wife about the small thing that you asked her to do or you expected 1,000 times. It might just be like moving a cup here and there, but it adds up, right? Yeah. So when you feel those feelings, how do you then, can you walk me through like the 1, 2, 3?
Well, again, this is what we talked about in our last episode, right? So when you feel a certain feeling and you're frustrated, you don't want to also keep that in, because that would essentially be, in a sense, stonewalling, right? So we want to avoid that, so you don't create that resentment, that bitterness. So you do have to reach out. You do have to tell them, because you're feeling certain things, of how you feel. It's up to them the way they act. But you got to, at the very least, tell them of your woes, but doing it tactfully, kind of like you said earlier. It's like, hey, when you do this, I notice you do this, and it just makes me feel, really angry, right? And so I'd say that would be the protocol there, rather than the temptation of you're angry and then you just start spinning words that you're going to regret later.
Right. So you can't control what anybody else will do, because that's, that's impossible.
Yeah.
But you can at least not go into stonewalling yourself by actually labeling and speaking the way you feel, but in just a labeling manner. Like, hey, this is how I feel.
Yep.
And then you go into the resolution, hopefully.
Yeah, and it really is up to them whether they actually change. And that's one thing that, because human beings, God gave us choice. It's the power of choice. That's what makes us different from all the other animals. We have choice. You can't force someone, obviously. You could try criticizing them and really like being, super hard on them to get them to change, but that's only going to work temporarily. I would just say, hey, this is how you make me feel. And then also you have to talk about, if you do, assuming that they are logical, right? You have to also then talk about, okay, then let's make an agreement here. Let's get really specific about the agreement. Like, when you come home, I just want to be left, whatever you want, you do have to talk about that and get really specific about that. That's the other thing that my pastor taught me. And again, whether they follow through or not, that's up to your wife. You may have to talk about it a few times, but that would be that next step.
Okay. All right.
So,
so unless there's anything to add, maybe we can go into stonewalling.
just one thing, I think when it comes to husbands, I think because one of the things that they talk about is mockery, right? And I think you and we both do this. I'm telling you, probably most of husbands, 80%, I would say, of husbands do this, right? We kind of like mock our wife in a very playful way.
Sure. Yeah. It's kind of a guy thing. I mean, we tease each other all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're so used to that, but I don't think girls are used to that. I think girls are,
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Like they're more sensitive to those things. And I think mockery, when it's lighthearted, is fine. However, when it's mockery in terms of actually like attacking their personal character, even though it's in a lighthearted way, or like just bringing them down, it's like, oh, you're so dumb, like just in like a fun, playful way. I think that's where it can be really destructive, and that's where that contempt can really be strong on somebody. Does that make sense? Because then you're just like, yeah, you're making fun of them, but now they're starting to feel lesser. They're starting to feel smaller and more incapable and more, you name it. And that's actually not what you want from your partner. Yeah, you may be right about some of their behavior, but when you are mocking them in that way, you're actually making them more like that, and they're going to make more mistakes. And one thing I try to be very careful with my wife is that I try to mock in a very, not mock, that's not the right word, but like just make fun in a very lighthearted way on things that aren't very serious. And I also, uplift her every chance I get as well. So
like, what's an example of a lighthearted mockery?
Okay, I'm going to tell you something we talked about last night. So there's this style apparently, and girls are going to hate me for this, but it's like there's this like Madewell style where the pants goes up here.
Oh,
and
sure.
But then it like flares out, like starting the thighs, it like flares out.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And for me, it's like I don't like that. I don't think it's I honestly don't think it's like flattering to a girl. And so I just kind of like, I kind of make fun of those kind of things, but I'm more focusing on the clothing.
Right.
But then of course she took it personal and whatnot. And so I had to
And then what happened?
Yeah. Oh, you don't want to know what happened. Do you see the marks?
Should we bring Rebecca in here?
But I try to keep it lighthearted. I don't talk about, I probably have never talked about her intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
Like not once.
Yeah.
But so many men do that, right? I never talk about her intelligence because I never want her to feel dumb. Even when she makes mistakes, and that's another thing I want to talk about, it's okay to make mistakes. It actually drives me crazy when I hear about just one of the spouses making the other partner feel really bad for making a mistake, right? If they made the same mistake 50 times over, then you really got to have a serious talk and a serious expectation talk.
Yes.
But just because they make mistakes, it doesn't, I personally don't want to be in a relationship where I can't make mistakes. Because let's be honest, like we even in business, the most successful business people throw tons of darts and they miss most of them. Yes. And it's the one or two darts that actually hit the bullseye where they make all their money. And so in the same way, I actually used to be that person where I used to be like, I used to like make fun of people for making mistakes because I had that to me. And so I kind of like projected on other people my pain. But what I realized is that you don't want to cultivate a situation in your relationship, like a dynamic where the other person feels like they have to be walking on coals and that they can't make mistakes. People also need to stop trying to feel right. Stop trying to be right all the time. That's not helping the marriage. And I know there are people like that out there who it's really hard to be in a marriage with someone who wants to be right all the time. You know what I mean? Like even with our clients, we try to be very, I don't make people feel bad. Even when I clearly know the answer. Now, most people listen to us, but I don't make them feel bad because that's not going to get us to the goal. which is the goal is to have a great relationship. Yeah, I might be right and they, may feel bad, but it's like if I like I told you so, I told you shouldn't do that. That's only going to make them feel like more apart. And I don't think that's going to help in the long run of them wanting to listen to you. If you are right, they'll know. You don't have to make them feel bad. Eventually, that's the thing, like eventually as you are, because it's the whole emotional bank account thing where they build trust just naturally. You don't have to emphasize that you were right. Just keep being right and don't say anything and don't make them feel bad when they're wrong. I think my wife naturally just trusts me now because I say things and I am right. But when I am right, I don't make her feel bad. But because when you make them feel bad, it actually, this is what I observe, it actually makes them want to not do it more. Does that make sense? Like they don't, like, because like, I don't want my husband to be right again and make me feel bad. Because people want to feel important. That's what they desire most. And if you're making them feel small and bad every time the husband's right or the wife is right, you're just, it's not a good feeling. And so sometimes they just don't want to, like, they want to do the opposite of whatever they say. And you don't want that dynamic either. Does that make sense?
There's a lot
to you?
to unpack there. So I think it does make sense. And again, as we talk about this, I'm just thinking about the things that I've encountered and I've dealt with as recent as last night at 11 p.m. on my kitchen table.
Oof.
One of the things that I want to go back to is when is too much, right? I think there's definitely, maybe it's a controversial way of thinking, but it is a fact that there's masculine energy and there's feminine energy, right?
Yes.
When men are, if you go to a construction site, let's just be super cliche, right? I've worked with contractors, construction people. I mean, if you get out there and you're easily offended, good luck, right?
Yeah.
They'll make fun
Get
of
destroyed.
anything,
Yeah.
Like you could be too good looking and they'll make fun of you, right?
Yeah. You probably got that all the time. Yeah.
No, actually.
Oh.
No. But like to your point, we are just so used to as guys teasing each other because that's kind of how men play. It's like, even like it's a backhanded compliment that we can give in a kind of a seemingly negative way, but it's like that's an actual compliment. But then when that seeps into the relationship with the other sex, it can be a problem. So like just having the awareness of, okay, maybe I said a little too much. And then that's kind of where you draw the line, right? If it attacks the character, you're already on this side. If it's the trait or the thing or the situation, like the clothes or, whatever, that's kind of playful. And you have to be playful because that's what a relationship is all about.
Yes.
If you're so easily offended, I mean, good luck. Good luck, right?
Yeah.
And then on the feminine side, like my wife and I joke around about like, wait, so what happened in your friends group today? Because she just went out, for example, 3 days ago with all of her like old nursing friends and all that. And she would tell me the stories that they shared, and it's so different than what we would do. Like if there's a bunch of guys, in a circle, it sounds this way. But then if some women are in a circle, it's mostly or a lot of like supporting each other. Like, oh yeah, right. Yeah. I would, exactly. Oh, he did this or she did this or this happened. Oh my God. So there's a lot of empathy. But my argument is that can also go too far too, because you can validate the wrong thing as well. Do you feel what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have any thoughts on this?
I do. Actually, I think this is so important. Friends can make or break a relationship. It's so important to make sure either your friends are going to support your relationship or you drop those friends. And I say that honestly because I have just seen so many times where the friends would, let me give you an example. The wife has a problem with the husband. They go to the friends about this. And then it's like, my husband, he doesn't take care of the kids when he's home, something like that. And then the friends are like, oh yeah, like he doesn't take care of this. What a lazy guy. Oh, he's the worst. And you have friends like that who just keep validating this rotating, which is again,
Right.
like it's the exact opposite of what you should do. You need to think of your spouse with light, with life. But then these friends are validating this, and then they just keep talking about this. I know it feels good because venting feels good,
It feels good.
right?
It feels great.
But the problem is that as they keep doing that, then they actually separate the relationship. Listen, if you're in a marriage, I believe you should do whatever it takes to make it work. If you're in just a relationship, okay, maybe there's like, because the friends are there to protect you. And so maybe if it's just not working out, the friends need to then step in and be like, hey, this is not working out. But then when you're married, I believe friends need to be extremely careful about how you talk about their husbands. I believe they need to listen, let them vent, but then also start talking positively about that husband and try not to be too negative about that other person, because that's only going to it's going to end up breaking them apart. And that's not really what you want. Now, there are obviously exceptions. The husband's like beating their wives, obviously break up. Right.
Sure.
That's not what I'm talking about. Right. But there are certain moments where it's like, no, girl, you need to get out of this relationship. But then for the most part, friends need to be very careful on how they validate the girl's problems with their spouses, because they could break that relationship, and it would be because of them, largely because of them.
It's also socially validating amongst your peers, or you're trying to get into a new group, for example, or whatever it is, to be that person, right?
Yeah.
To kind of go around and agree with everything. Because I've been I've done that before, right?
Yeah.
And when I was younger, and I think as you get older, you kind of build more resilience to that. But when you're younger, or you're in a situation, you might be thinking, oh well, if I agree with this person, if I validate this person, they're gonna like me more.
Yep.
So there's like the social currency, right? That you exchange with each other. But then, one practice that I know you do, and that I try to do, when we have friends discussions about spouses, or even other good friends or coworkers or whatever, is just step into their perspective for a second. Like, I wonder why that happened. Oh, maybe it was because of this. Maybe it was because of that. So there's different things you can do, but I think guys will be guys. And as long as you understand that you have to live on the right side of the fence most of the time, because we're not going to be perfect, right? And then for women, it's the same thing, like too much validation and feeling good about just kind of vomiting your concerns and worries emotionally. I think that's also, it can be a red flag, like you talked about. There's so much to unpack there, but I think I just wanted to touch on that before we moved on.
It's really good.
I'm sure we could talk about this for hours.
That should be a whole segment in itself. I really think that, I think, with the Stephen Covey's emotional bank account,
right?
When you're gossiping about someone, it feels good in the moment, but you're actually separating yourself with your friends in a certain sense. Because when you're gossiping, when you turn around, you're going to feel like they're subconsciously, it's not conscious, but subconsciously you feel like they're talking behind your back.
Yes.
And then when something happens, the drama happens, then so
the internal story connects. That's like, oh, well, he talked about this, with me, so he must be saying the same thing about me.
Exactly.
And it is subconscious, but then you don't realize it until something bad happens in your relationship, right?
Exactly. But we can move on. Yeah. It's just I think that's such an important point that you brought up.
So one more thing is, I've felt this from, I think you and I tend to be kind of like stronger males in terms of, being a leader in the household.
Just kidding.
Strength and femininity.
Oh.
And I think that, so men and women just fight in different ways, right? like we advocate for ourselves in different ways. And I think that, and I please call me out if I'm typecasting, but I think it is an easier route for some females or wives to go into the contempt territory.
Yes.
Because that is like, we just have physical power or strength, right? And for the feminine side, it's not that, it's something else. And that's something else. It's words.
Yep.
It's emotion. It's the energy.
Yep.
And that's where they're like, this is kind of my arena, right?
Yep.
And it's these, again, I'm not going to go into details, but I think we can all think of little situations where this pattern continues to happen. And it's like, it's not very in your face, but it's like kind of there all the time. Whatever it is, it could be on the guy side or women's side, but I think I think when we go into stonewalling, my argument, maybe I'm wrong, but my argument would be that men are more probably, it's easier to stonewall because it's easier to just go, shut the blinds.
I don't want to deal with this.
I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
I'm going to play, whatever.
Yeah.
So I just, so to head into stonewalling, can you give us the definition of that and what your framework is around that?
Yeah, again, so stonewalling is withdrawing from the interaction, shutting down and stopping to respond to your partner. Again, this is often a response to contempt. I know a lot. I think you're right. I think a lot of men do this because women, well, that's not true. I mean, it's not fully true because women also can stonewall.
Yes.
I just have noticed it more in men because they just don't want to deal with their nagging wife. Right? That's kind of girls. They want to talk about it. I want to talk about it, but then guys are just like, no. I want to get to my video games. I had a long day at work. I don't want to deal with this, and that could be extremely destructive. Imagine I don't even know how to. It's like this is what's popping into my mind. It's like having mold in a certain section of the house. But the mold spores, they sport, whatever, they spray and then they just grow, right? So it starts as this, and you want to nip it in the bud, right? Like right away. But what happens is when you stonewall, you let this mold just grow and grow and grow, and it's just growing, and the person's just getting even more resentful and then what our mind does? We have arguments in our own minds before even talking to the actual spouse, and they make assumptions, right? Based off this character that they've created that they're arguing with.
In their head. Yeah.
In their head.
Yeah.
And so that's going to just keep festering and festering and festering if you stonewall. And then, you could just, because what happens when you stonewall is you kind of just get over it and you stop thinking about it. You kind of bury it a little bit. But you're not actually solving anything. The mold is still there. It's an infection that's growing, and you have to antiseptic it, right? And so I think that's where this is a huge mistake. The reason why this causes divorces is because you're allowing this bitterness to fester, and you're not dealing with the actual problem, and you're just getting on to the next one. Most of the time, it doesn't last. I just heard of a TikTok video. It's like, oh, I haven't fought with my husband or no, my boyfriend or whatever, my partner in 2 years. We haven't fought once. And it's like, you think about that and you want to kind of go like this, but if you really think about it, that's probably a red flag right there.
He's just crying in the closet every night.
Maybe. So what do you think?
I agree with that. I agree with that assessment because I, number one, have been part of that. Like
tell me about it.
I just don't want to. I can't because I'll get emotional.
Yeah. I have my shirt.
I have work to do today.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to say this because we live in this society where like some of our traditional values are being questioned, and for good reason, right? But there is a divide between how men and women react to things. I mean, the silly example is, if you're my wife and we get attacked by a guy with a knife, I'm not going to be like, hey, like rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah.
Is it your turn? No, it's just me.
Yep.
At least that's how I think, right?
Yeah.
And I might lean on my wife for some other things, but it is so different. And I think stonewalling is because I've done this before. Like I have had instances where I've experienced contempt and I'm like, I don't want to deal with this. That's the number one thing that the voice that pops up into my head. I don't want to deal with this. It's not worth my time. I have more important things to do in my mind.
Sure.
And then on top of that, like it's layers. Then there's social media or games or even like exercise. Whatever.
Ways to like run away
Or
like
turn
an escape.
Yeah. Exactly. Because we're so good at, like, our brains are survival machines, and we're so good in our own ways to find different ways to kind of weasel out of the situation, right?
Yeah.
So I totally agree. I'm just kind of agreeing with you. And stonewalling is definitely, once you push it down, it multiplies and it festers, like you said, and it's definitely going to explode in some other way, shape, or form. And then you're not even talking about the issue. Now it's just like a nuclear bomb that goes off.
If you don't mind, I want to talk about vices. And what I mean by vices is those ways to escape from the situation, right? So we have Netflix, we have video games, we have, partying, drinking, drugs, marijuana, whatever, right? You have all of these ways to escape. I think one of the biggest problems with some of these vices, I'm not making people feel bad for watching Netflix, but if you're using Netflix as a means to escape from the situation, thus exacerbating the situation because you're not dealing with the mold problem, I believe that's where your vices can be very destructive. And it's actually better for you to be able to cut those vices than to have a way to escape from the situation and not deal with situations. So if you're catching yourself not dealing with situations that you should be dealing with and running away to those vices, I believe people need to really audit, should I cut these vices from my life? Because these things are going to destroy my life. Relationships take time. Relationships take extra effort. I know your day was hard. I know you worked all day and your boss screamed at you. I get it. But if you don't do some of these proactive things like listening to your wife, letting your wife, something we talked about in the last podcast, letting her just talk, let her talk completely, make sure she is fully understood. And that may take, let's be honest, 30 minutes, an hour of just talking. But what you're doing is you're creating psychological error for her and it's making her feel understood. Then you can start having a conversation. But these things take time. It takes a lot of emotional, effort. And so that's where taking out those vices may be really important, or just stopping it temporarily until you got to handle your S, right? And so that's one thing I just want to point out where those vices can be very destructive. Men or women should not run away from their problems because that's only going to exacerbate the problem. You have to deal with your problem. Then you can go watch Netflix. Then you can, have a few drinks. Then you can go play video games or, go shop or whatever. But I wouldn't use those things as a means to escape. And then, of course, you may be able to get past through this situation, but then the situation is going to come up and it's going to be an even bigger explosion and an argument. That's just my thoughts.
At a certain point, you have to decide, do you want your life to change? Do you want things to be better? And, there's a lot that we talk about that are layers upon layers upon layers. But I really think the first graspable straw, like what can we do right now, is just being and having awareness, right?
Yeah.
If you said something nasty, if you did something wrong, just be like, okay, I wouldn't have felt good about that either.
Yeah.
And maybe even apologizing to your wife or your husband or your friend or even a client, or it doesn't matter. Could be to your dog. Like, it's cleansing to apologize and come forth.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You are a different person today than that time yesterday. And again, I'm speaking from recent experience, right? Like the feeling of being caught up in those emotions is very intoxicating and validating. And then yet I know that it's just like eating an ice cream. It's like, yeah, short term, great. I don't want to think about my problems, but then other problems happen in the long term.
Diabetes later, you know, 300 pounds later, whatever.
Come
It's
on.
like,
Yeah, metabolic
but ice cream tastes
dysfunction,
good, right?
you know, or tobacco. I mean, add whatever. It could literally be anything as long as you're not dealing with the thing in even the most minute and small way to gain yourself momentum. I just watched a podcast with 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞, the guy of Atomic Habits,
Oh, yeah.
right?
I just read that book.
Really?
It's my second time reading the book.
We're vibing somehow.
Oh, wow.
But like one of the best things that I remember, you know, of this 2-hour conversation is start small. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you talk about baby steps all the time.
Yep.
If you want to go to the gym, okay, it's not about doing a power clean and deadlifting 400 pounds. It's about let's get your shoes on. Let's get in the car. You know, apparently there was a guy who lost 80 pounds. This is like from him, you know, James' story. He lost 80 pounds and kept it off. It's not losing it, it's keeping it off. It's not having an argument one time, but it's continuing to not have arguments with your wife. It's the prolonged effect, right? Yeah. And all he did for like 4 weeks or some amount of time was he literally just went to the gym and spent 5 minutes and came back.
Yeah.
Which is like, well, why am I even wasting? But habits must be established before they can be improved upon. So the habit of awareness, at least for me, is what I've held on to, is like, okay, this is happening. It's happening right now. Like I'm getting into an argument with my client because he thinks he's right. And I have like 10 years of experience. When you start saying those things, it's like, oh, okay, let's the car is going this way into the ditch, right?
Yeah.
And it's these little minute corrections, but I think the awareness is key, and then just trying to layer another piece and another piece. The things that we talked about that you're going to see in the shorts, you know, hold on to those, save it, bookmark it, whatever, and just be like, okay, let's just try this one thing, you know? So,
everything that we talk about, it's not about, it really is about hearing things over and over and over. And it may be your 150th time listening to the same thing where your brain clicks and you start making a change.
Right.
And when we're talking about all these things, we're not perfect at these things. You know, I talk about these things. I've read so many, I've read probably overall, I've read many, many, many dozens and dozens and dozens of books about relationships. And at the end of the day, I'm not perfect at it, but sometimes I just have to hear it over and over again. So it takes 66 days to develop a habit, right? You also have, when you do something, like when you exercise, you put on your shorts, you go to the gym, you work out. That action then creates a neural pathway in your mind, right? But then the more you do that action, the neural pathway continues to get stronger and stronger. Right. I don't know if you've looked at these studies. I was a psych major, but it's interesting how you just keep reinforcing those neural pathways. They get stronger, right? And so that habit develops. When you develop that habit, then it becomes weird when you don't do some of these things. And so these things do take time. Just start with a little bit. Whatever you hear today, just start with one thing. And you have to, again, you're in the moment, right? You're drunk. You're drunk on that anger or whatever you are.
Oh, you're feeling it.
Just like you did what you were thinking consciously about it while you were having an argument, right? You have to kind of take a step back from yourself and then let your higher heads think for you and say, no, I'm going to change my behavior. I'm going to change what I say, which is so opposite of what I would normally do, but that's how you create that change.
I think the example that I keep thinking of when you say those habits and the neural pathways is the tracks in the snow, right? You imagine like it snowed and then, or maybe tire tracks, whatever it is. You're going to have this groove that forms. And then, or like for those of us who know bowling, it's like, it doesn't look like there's anything there, but then if you spin it and send it on the right side of the lane, it goes and then just swerves, curves left, because there is that groove that's carrying it.
Yeah.
And you have to establish just a tiny bit of that to then have that groove then you kind of are gravitating toward that, because you're like, oh, it feels better to be here because I've established that habit. And then you can dig deeper and dig a trench. And then now I'm doing I actually just did this with my wife. Like we went to the gym and I know, Jessica, I love you, but this is something that we've been dealing with, right? Like health for me is a stress reliever, non-negotiable. And I'm actually super proud of her because she just signed up for like a kickboxing class. She's actually there right now.
That's great.
And she's been like, oh, my mood is better. And I'm like, oh, wow. Because I'm happy. Like I'm genuinely happy. But before we've had experiences where we've gone to the gym, we've fought. Like forget this. Because I was being that crazy like coach person, right? Yeah. Overbearing and, And then one time we went to the gym and we went there for like 10 minutes and we just came back. She's like, oh, are we done? And she was like feeling good about that. And, it's just these little things that you build upon yourself. And then I will share this story just because I kept talking about this argument that I had. And it's a real story, right? And I love my wife. She's kind of the glue that keeps our house together. But one of the things that we argued about is about finances, right? And it's about finances as pertaining to our kid's birthday party that's coming up. So real thing, March 22nd, my son turns 8 years old. And for parents out there, I know how it is. You go to, you hear stories. Oh, they hired a pony, for their birthday.
Yeah.
I went to a house, beautiful house, that had like a water view, and they had Spider-Man show up.
Wow.
And he was slinging webs, and the kids were just like, oh my God, I'm in heaven, right? And then we went to and these are all great, and I'm very grateful to have been a part of this, and we have friends that have, friendships that have developed. But at the same time, we didn't have that when we were kids. I was just telling your wife, my mom had a birthday banner that said happy birthday. And we just had some cake and some duck, like some Korean, like pastries and stuff. So now there's these hidden expectations of like, okay, well, we went to that birthday party and those friends are coming to your son's birthday party.
With a banner.
Not my son, your son.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's when you know.
She didn't do that. I'm just doing that,
Yeah.
But that's the conversation, right?
I get it.
And I'm like, okay. So my logical is kicking in already. Like you see me like, like my body posture is already like, And I'm thinking, it's like, okay, now I have 2 kids. Is it 500 to 1,000 times 2 per year? Is that going to break my bank? No, I could do that every day, but it's the expectation. And we're trying to have this conversation about uncovering the expectation and feeling like, okay, what are we really living up to? Is it our standards? Is it their standards? And this conversation literally just happened where I was thinking about, because it was getting heated, right? Because on my wife's side, it's like I want my son to have a great experience and to be liked by his friends. Super valid.
Yeah,
Me too.
Makes sense.
Me too.
Makes total sense. Yeah.
But me as a guy and a dad, I'm like, no, you got to suffer a little bit. Like you can't have this right now. I want you to actually suffer. Like I can't say that to her, but I'm saying it to you.
Yeah.
Because I know you will understand, right?
Yeah.
I want him to be or have a little less.
Yeah.
And I still want to figure out a way to save a couple to maybe $300 and have a good creative way of, there's tons of games. So anyway, that's kind of the real thing that happened. And one of the things that I'm very, very, very proud of my wife for doing is it got to a point where we were just kind of like, we're trading some blows, right? And she was like, I cannot have a rational conversation with you. I'm going to go upstairs.
Okay.
And that was actually the first time she said those words to me. And I felt so proud of her because, it didn't feel good at that moment. But I went upstairs after and I took some deep breaths and I went up there and I kissed her all over her face. She loves that kind of stuff.
You got to
Can
someone's got to,
So like I did all that and she giggled and squealed, and you know, you don't want to go to bed and sleep with anger in your heart, right? It's a biblical thing. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, what's the Bible?
So we woke up, we hugged each other. I'm going to talk to her about this like right after this, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, finances are a big topic, and that's literally what just happened, and I'm just being vulnerable and I'm sharing with you.
I think there's so many things there.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I want to point out that you did really well is how you came in and just kind of apologized. Like someone has to apologize.
Oh, for sure.
To be honest, it's something that my wife does way better than I do. When the other person apologizes, even though they may still feel like they're right, it disarms like no other.
Yes.
Have you noticed that?
I didn't want to do that, but I know the power of that. Because when somebody says it to me, I'm like, oh, no. It's, you know, I'm already...
Exactly. It's so your feelings were this, I don't want to do this, but then you got to have your the love, your higher heads overcome and do the right thing. And that's how you're going to create change. Something we talked about in our past podcast.
Yeah.
But it's something that I really love that Rebecca does. And admittedly, like I do this as well, but she does it so much better. She always apologizes for the way, like at least her anger. And I really appreciate that because it really does change the dynamics of our argument. It makes us like, okay, now we're starting to submit a little bit. And sometimes we get back into the argument as we talk. Which is fine. But you got to, like when you come back into it, so take a deep breath. Whoever the bigger person is, it should, my father-in-law says it should be the man who always says sorry first. It's hard to do, but you got to kind of like just, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for, and say sorry for what you should be sorry for, like the actions, what you may have said, your anger, all that. You don't necessarily have to like lie to them, be like, I'm sorry for doing this, because you may not necessarily be sorry for that, but you could apologize for what you are sorry for. Anyway, really great point. I just
wanted to share. And I mean, don't like say sorry mockingly either, because that's gonna, I'm sorry, you know, like that's, don't just if you're gonna do that, just space.
Yeah.
Distance it. After a day, maybe even 2, maybe 3, you're going to come back and be like, all right, let's talk about it. So anyway, I just want people to know that this is something I deal with as well.
I think relationships and finance is such a huge portion of marriage. It's one of the biggest reasons why actually there are divorces. It's actually because of finance.
Yes,
right?
It is.
And so one of the things that I know it wasn't just about the money, right? It totally makes sense what you said. I honestly, I get Jessica's point. I also get your point as, you know, the provider who has to look at the, you know, finances, and also with, you know, trying to be a good father and not letting your child just have everything that they want. That's not the point, right? You kind of have to, you know, have that chip on your shoulder in order for you to want more, right? So I totally get the two sides. I think though, just focusing on the finances part, what people need to do, I think honestly, people have to prepare before even marriage. In my opinion, you should start focusing on financial literacy and financial discipline. I think you should start budgeting right away. It's something that, you know, you could do later on in life. You could start now. I'm not saying it's too late if you're already married, but I would suggest starting right away, because once you have that budget, and use, because expectations are really big in marriage. And so the thing about a budget is, again, if finances are one of the reasons why people get a divorce, like one of the biggest reasons why you get a divorce, then having a budget, I think, is really important. So if we have a budget for parties, or I have a budget for 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭 of how much, you know, now we obviously did it wrong because we had such a nominal amount in there, but having a budget for parties might really help in terms of, you know, making sure that there's the right expectations. You know what? We hit our budget this month. Sorry, we got to be really creative. But then at least you don't have to get into the argument, because we already had a set expectation. No, we're not gonna we're not just gonna compromise expectations. This is what we decided on doing.
We both agreed on.
Exactly.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, that's where I mean, already the energy is shifting even between our, I guess, role play into like a positive, let's do this. And I think budgeting, everything we just talked about in the last few podcasts, especially about the emotional side of talking to your partner, especially for finances, especially for budgeting, because then it gets to like the kind of person you might really be. And then you have to change that. But how do you not point a finger directly at that and be like, let's look at the behavior? And then you can use these tactics, the awareness, the, I noticed, right?
Yeah.
When this happens, I feel this way. Labeling, everything that you talked about. And we have these conversations with other people all the time, whether it's clients or friends. Like for some reason, a lot of people come to both of us for relationship stuff.
Yeah.
And you and I just kind of share stories of like, oh, wow. And then I think it makes us reflect on our own marriage. But anyway, I think those are very, very good. I'm sure we could go on and on. Is there anything else you feel like we should have touched on or want to mention?
I mean, there's a lot of things I do want to touch on. I think we've talked about a lot, and I think we should just have another. I mean, relationships are going to be a huge part of our podcast because it's just what is important to us. We really are into finances. We really are into health, and we're really into relationships. And so we'll just continue talking about these things, and we're still learning ourselves. So we'll talk about it more.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The last thing I'll say, guys, is that, we take time out of our busy days to do this podcast. And so please just hit that like button. It'll really help our algorithm. And also, please hit that subscribe button. And so you can get more content like this. Thank you so much for staying tuned. And we'll try to give you guys the best content that we can. Thank you.